People may think it's actually a protein deficiency that's keeping them from developing muscle mass, but that's probably not the case. We've already mentioned the stress hormones, which are catabolic. Now, probably the most anabolic thing we do is actually sleep, and we don't do enough of that. So prior to the advent of the electric bulb, 1870, the average population slept 10 hours a night. We're now down to 6.7 hours a night. So instead of getting 3.3 extra hours of nice, anabolic, nourishing, restful process, we've got 3.3 hours more of catabolism. As we're running those stress hormones for 3.3 extra hours, we're breaking down tissue. And the solution to that is not protein. Now, there's another factor that, or many, many factors that are very significant in that as well. And that is too many people have too much biologic acid in their system because of impairment in the ability to clear the acids. Now, this may be more of a tangent than you want at this point, but understand that we're made up of 100 trillion cells. They're all exposed to 1 trillion molecules of oxygen a day. And when those cells give off carbon dioxide, they create an acid in the body called carbonic acid. And this is something that we must deal with, or we will very, very simply die. So all of our elimination routes get rid of acid. We exhale carbon dioxide. Our urine should be acid. Our bowels should be acid. Our sweat should be acid. The liver and kidneys work together to process acid. And acid is catabolic. Acid impairs the efficiency of every hormone and enzyme, and especially the anabolic hormones that we're deficient in. And so we get this inflamed catabolic acid state, and we think we need more protein.
Welcome back to High Intensity Health Radio. It's Mike Mutzel here. Thank you so much for being here. We're with the Dr. Bob Rakowski today, and we're going to talk about nutritional strategies to help optimize athletic performance. And Dr. Bob Rakowski lectures internationally on this topic. He was just in Minnesota at Lifetime Fitness. We're going to hear a little bit more about that. He has a great upcoming workshop, and he's going to share some pearls that he's going to be sharing with healthcare practitioners and athletes at that workshop. And he has quite the list of individuals that he's helped optimized athletic performance from Michael Bennett, who, Dr. Bob, I live here in Seattle, so we're all big fans of Michael Bennett, Yao Ming, Evander Holyfield, the list goes on. You've helped a lot of people. So, Dr. Bob, thanks so much for being here.
I'm honored, Mike. Thanks for having me as your guest.
Fantastic. How did you get into this space? I mean, you're working with some pretty high-level athletes. Like, kind of talk to us about how that started.
It started with great mentors. And I have to say it actually started with a failure. So my first degree was electrical engineering, and I was academically pretty sharp. I graduated second in my class, missed valedictorian by, hundredths of a point. But I got out into the field, and I never really felt good about my skills as an engineer. And the guys that were really, really good were people that were in the trenches. They were working through, they had their hands on what they wanted to do. So when I decided to become a chiropractor, which, by the way, is an interesting story in and of itself. Great shout out to my original chiropractor from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Dr. Mike Wickers. The guy changed my life, saved my life, helped me tremendously and really cared about me as a human. And I asked him, I said, Mike, I was great academically in engineering. How do I become a great chiropractor? He said, Bob, that's simple. Learn from great chiropractors. So he said, I want you to spend as much time studying from people that are succeeding in the field as you are putting into the academic work, and literally get your hands on people right away. So I started that. My quest for nutrition started even before chiropractic. I realized that nutrition was very important, like many teens. Now we're going back a long way when I was a teen, and maybe even junk food wasn't as junky as it is now. But I came to realize that on a diet of fast food, suddenly my body was struggling. Instead of really rising to the occasion on performance, I found myself struggling to recover, struggling for wind. And I said, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to eat good foods for a week and see what happened. And I've never turned around since then. 35 years later, I'm an absolute health nut and sharing it with the world. But with great mentors, I took passion in what I was doing. I put in a lot of effort and practice, and literally gave 110% to everyone that walked in my door. Soon enough, I had some high-level local athletes, and that led to higher-level athletes. And then finally, one day I get a call from Evander Holyfield, who lived in Atlanta but trained in Houston. And he had a fight coming up that week and had a bad sinus infection. Medicine wasn't knocking it out. And he asked me if I thought I could do something. And my answer was, I don't know, but I'll try. And that's always my answer. We did some cranial manipulation and really put him on a solid nutrition program. And his trainer just simply told me, he said, you know what, Bob, we've been looking for a doctor like you for 20 years.
Wow.
And it was, you found me, tell your friends.
Mm-hmm.
So within 6 weeks, I had treated 6 members of Evander Holyfield's family and never looked back. Just had a windfall of phenomenal high-level athletes and humans.
Mm-hmm. That's quite amazing. We recently had JJ Virgin on. That's interesting. Her perspective is just like yours, is find someone who is at where you want to be and go learn from them. And, in her perspective, in her case, she was paying people to help her to get where she needed to be. And so I think that's really important, for people that are trying to do it yourself, whether it's, trying to, get stronger or trying to improve your business or trying to improve your fitness. Sometimes you need to pay someone or need to go work or shadow or mentor someone to get that knowledge, which is pretty fascinating. So when someone comes in, Evander Holyfield or a weekend warrior athlete, where do you start with them? Okay, they have a complaint, but if they want to optimize their performance, their nutrition, fat loss, is there a program that you work them through? Is everyone different?
Well, certainly they're all different, but I'll quote a great trainer named Paul Chek, and his comment is, if you're not assessing, you're guessing. And so we're not going to guess. My engineering background says have something that's measurable, measure it, find out where they are, find out where they want to be, and then create the fastest route to get there. So, I had my mind made up. I was very well prepared when Holyfield came in. I booked out 2 hours. I said, okay, I'm going to look at his structure from top to bottom. I'm going to test the intrinsic muscles of his feet. I'm going to make sure that his body is phenomenally balanced. I'm also going to check every aspect of his chemistry that I knew. And then I was going to dot every I and cross every T and show him where he was and where we could take him. And like I said, his trainer's comment was, wow, we've been looking for a doctor like you for 20 years, because amazingly, there's a guy that had all the connections, all the money, all the desire to be the best of the best. And someone had never taken that time with him. So, a typical person that comes in, we're going to schedule an hour, and I certainly don't need to test every single muscle of every body of every patient, but I wasn't going to pass that opportunity with Holyfield. So I'm going to do a phenomenal structural assessment, and I've spent decades learning that. I'm going to do a phenomenal biochemical assessment, and I've spent decades learning that. And then simply, there are some patterns that exist in our society that are so common. If you didn't have the same tools or knowledge, you could apply them with probably a better than 90% hit rate for the general population to get better. And that's what I do with doctors all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about those tools and then dive into maybe the more esoteric stuff. So you said the 90% hit rate. So pretty much something that everyone can change. What would that be?
Well, let's just start out with what is the most common endocrine problem. And this will be shocking to most people to some degree, but it's actually elevated stress hormones, elevated cortisol. So there's a quote from the literature, and again, I'm used to teaching doctors, but it uses these exact words. Many, or most likely all, New World primates, and we are primates, even though we may not want to admit that, I don't for sure, have elevated cortisol and cortisol resistance. So a lot of people in this listening audience may be familiar with the term insulin resistance. And what I tell people is that bodies ignore constant stimuli. So the classic example is, someone may have a pair of glasses or sunglasses that they wear. Suddenly they put them up on their head and they spend 15 minutes looking for their glasses because they can't find them. Bodies ignore constant stimuli. So when they're constantly bombarded by the signal of insulin, they actually ignore the signal by decreasing insulin receptors. The same thing happens with cortisol. Now, a lot of people have been taught about the horrors of excess stress hormones. And what I tell people is they do break down your body. They do shut down your immune system. But on some level, and at a moderate level, low level, they're very, very important to health and wellness. We don't live without them. But with too many of them, what happens is they lose their ability to control inflammation in the body. And so we become inflamed. The word inflammation literally means fire within. We're burning up on the inside. We're breaking down our tissue. We're not recovering. We're not sleeping. We're suppressing our immune system. We're developing what's known as a leaky gut. And that is a serious issue. So for so many people, that's going to be primary. Now, I use esoteric testing for that. Now, if you have cortisol resistance, guess what? A blood level or even saliva level of cortisol won't tell you much at all, because you want to know how the body's responding, not the baseline level. So we look at things like urinary chlorides, which is a test that's been around for a long, long time. It's called the Kronosberg test. We look for things like orthostatic hypotension, blood pressure dropping from lying to standing. We look at pupillary dilation to light. We look at things known as viscerosomatic reflexes. And we put together a picture of where the patient is, and it's very, very consistent that the typical patient out there has some level of cortisol resistance.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, great. Now, where do you go from there? So say, for example, the orthostatic hypertension or hypotension, someone gets very dizzy when they get up. And this is a thing that I hear a lot about, and particularly when people start workout programs, is all of a sudden, their adrenal hormones are not functioning properly. So what do we recommend? What are the top hit rate lifestyle therapies? We know meditation, heart math and all that stuff is really good, but let's talk about those modalities and then maybe nutritional supplements and ingredients that you find to be most effective.
Well, you hit on a couple of things right then and there. First of all, when you look at meditation, the sages of wisdom over time have all recommended that. They've all recommended deep breathing. We can put our body in a relaxed state, and most of us just plain don't take the time to do it. I recently read a book by a Navy SEAL called Resilience. And he says, we spend our whole life breathing, and yet most people don't even dedicate 5 minutes to learning how to breathe right. So that's part of SEAL training. These guys that are under the most extreme circumstances, by controlling their breath, they can focus their mindset. When you mention meditation, one of the best metaphors I've learned is we see all these people with these phenomenal physical physiques, and maybe the classic of all time is Arnold Schwarzenegger. But when you meditate, you can do that exact same thing to your mind. Mm-hmm. And now they have this functional MRI, and they can show that within 11 minutes meditation a day at 30 days, you've improved the structure and function of your mind. That's at 11 minutes. So why not give it 30 minutes? And again, it's a practice, and probably the first time people do it, or maybe even the 100th time they do it, they may still struggle with focus. But once you get it, you're in a much better position. When we start talking about nutraceuticals, over the last few years, there's been an interesting discovery. So when we look at our gut creates, on the average, more than 100 times the amount of chemistry that our brain has at any moment in time. And one of those chemicals is actually called melatonin. So melatonin is made at 400 times a higher level in the gut than it is in the brain. So it's very, very unlikely that melatonin actually crosses the blood-brain barrier. Some people think we have the blood-brain barrier to prevent toxins from getting in the brain. That's a nice thought, but it's not true. Most environmental toxins are fat soluble and will readily cross the blood-brain barrier. So it's not effective in that respect. But our blood-brain barrier is there to keep what's in our brain, and what's in our body, our body. And as I tell people, the neurotransmitter or the neurochemical of pain is called glutamate. At high levels in the brain, glutamate causes seizure and destroys neurons. So as I tell people, if we didn't have a blood-brain barrier, if suddenly we stubbed our toe, we'd probably have a seizure with all the glutamate that would get to our brain. So it stays there. Now back to the melatonin issue. So now we know that melatonin receptors exist in the adrenal cortex, and they actually prevent the central nervous system drive, the pituitary drive of cortisol. Mm. So one of the protocols that I've used with phenomenal success over the last handful of years is putting people on hourly doses of melatonin. Now, I understand you have a time-release melatonin, which may be even better yet, because about the half-life of melatonin is every hour. That's why we do it on hourly doses. So a lot of people that are used to running on stress hormones, suddenly they feel like someone's pulled the plug on them. And essentially we have. And I encourage them, if you need to take a nap, honor your body. And that's another thing we can talk about, sleep, which is horrifically deficient in this society. But of course, that doesn't work for police officers, someone who's going to be performing, high intensity neurosurgery or things like that. For people like that, I tell them take it every hour after work and every hour over the weekend. But if we can get people 7 to 10 days of hourly melatonin, they can break that central nervous system drive of stress hormones. and they can become very, very calm and at peace and begin to realize how good it feels to not be running on stress hormones.
Fascinating. So to kind of summarize right there, we have this cortisol resistance from this 24-hour society that we live in and all the stress and life and work burdens. And in order to kind of restore that cortisol resistance, we can use meditation, which you recommend, a minimum 11 minutes a day, but we can go up to as long as, we are still getting the benefits, which I think, from what I've read, the gold standard would be like 20 minutes twice a day, which I think would be phenomenal if we can get everyone doing that. And then the melatonin hourly. Now, let's talk about the dosing there, because I think a lot of companies sell like a 1 milligram, maybe some companies sell 800 microgram. So if we're going to do this hourly, what do you recommend, or what have you found to be the best for people?
Yeah, now that I've been doing it a few years, it seems that a milligram an hour is a real nice dose.
That's fantastic. Now, do you do the sublingual? I know there's some drips, capsules. Does it matter? What have you found?
You certainly want a high quality melatonin, and we want ease of use. So I use a liquid melatonin that actually tastes good, sweetened with natural sweeteners like stevia. People can carry it in their pocket, boom, boom, boom. It doesn't have to be every hour on the hour. Again, I know you have access to a time release, which I'm starting to play with as well. And over time, we'll see, okay, is that as effective? And if it is, it'd certainly be more convenient.
Love it. Gosh, this is great information. Cool. Okay. So what other high hit rate stuff? We have the stress issues. Obviously, I think diet's going to play a role there. You want to talk about some dietary stuff that you found to be most effective?
Yeah. So here's the biggest issue with diet. For most people, it's beyond terrible. Journal of the American Medical Association has published an article now 3 times over the last 20 plus years entitled Actual Causes of Death. What they've said is that death certificates say that heart disease is number 1, cancer is number 2, stroke is number 3, lung issues number 4. And that's been pretty consistent. But suddenly in 1990, they said, you know what, that's really not what's killing people. And the number 1 in 1990 happened to be cigarette smoking. And they grouped as number 2, they grouped both together poor diet, lack of exercise. Now in 2000, it was exactly the same. Then we had a new champion in 2010, or new villain, whatever you want to call it, and they realized poor diet was the number 1 killer. They gave cigarette smoking number 2. Somewhere along the line, like number 5, they gave inactivity. But here's what's surprising to me. They actually put in body mass index. Too high a body mass index is number 3. Then they put in high blood sugar as number 4. And then somewhere they had cholesterol and hypertension as number 6 and 7. But the way I look at things, poor diet, lack of exercise cause all of those except cigarette smoking. And that kills about 2.5 million people a year. So I like to quote some of the great sages of wisdom. And we can even go back, to Lucretius and, Hippocrates, right? Hippocrates said, let your food be your medicine. Lucretius said, one man's food's another man's poison. My follow-up to that is today, most men's food is a poison for all of humanity. Now we go with Jack LaLanne, who a lot of people may not know was a chiropractor, but certainly a health guru for a long, long time. And he said, if God made it, it's okay. If man made it, don't touch it.
Love it.
The follow-up to that might have been, if your grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents didn't eat it, guess what? You probably shouldn't either. And then Michael Pollan in Defense of Foods, very simple statement, eat food, real food, not too much, mostly plants. The not too much component is the number 1 mechanism, and really the only one ever proven to work for longevity is actually calorie restriction. Clive McKay won a Nobel Prize for that in 1930. So eat real food, not too much, mostly plants. And what that's going to do is get us a greater nutrient density. Now, one of the things I like to tell people is that right now, the U.S. Department of Agriculture says that only 7% of American farmland is considered prime. Now, that means there's a 93% chance our plants are grown in deficient soil. You can't give what you don't have. The plants can't give it to the animals. The plants and animals can't give it to the humans. And so we are extremely malnourished. So the Journal of Advances in Therapy took people that were age-matched, health-matched, actually took tissue levels of nutrient samples to start, gave them both equally good diets, organic, macronutrient balanced, and at the end of 90 days, took tissue samples again. One group, by the way, got the good diet. The other group got diet and supplementation. And here was the conclusion. Only the supplemented group was able to improve tissue levels of nutrients. Their next line was, therefore, supplementation is advisable for everyone. So my spin-off on that is, in this environment, food is too weak to replete depleted cells and bodies. And then you look at, not only do we have problems with the soil, but in this country, you use literally millions of pounds of insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, which are known to be cancer-causing agents. And the known dangers of them make them banned substances in most countries of the world. And therefore, a lot of countries will not accept food as an export from the U.S.
Gosh.
So, yeah, and one of the questions you asked me is, what type of message would I have for the politicians? And I think we'll get to that at the end. But clearly, if you're going to serve the people, you need to serve the people.
Yeah, great information. So what I heard you say right there is everyone should be supplementing with some sort of micronutrient, mineral, vitamin complex. And there's kind of a debate going on in the paleo community right now, from what I've gathered, whether or not that's absolutely necessary. Do we need, as long as we're eating real food? But what I heard you say is real food is not as real as it used to be. So everyone should be on a high quality micronutrient complex.
Unless they're getting their foods from the Amazon forest, which still has nutrient density, at least to this date, good luck, right? And if it's organic, it's going to spoil by the time it's shipped to the States. So I'm guessing they're probably not getting it there unless it's been loaded up with some pretty nasty preservatives. So.
Right. And let's kind of talk about that a little bit more. Not only the micronutrients, the minerals and vitamins, but the phytonutrients. So we talked about the body when, for example, the consistency or the constant, when you wear sunglasses on your head and you're like, oh my gosh, where are they? Well, if the plants are being, laden with pesticides and herbicides, they don't need to produce their own endogenous antioxidant, compounds, the phytonutrients. So let's talk to us about phytonutrients and kind of detox pathways and why they're so important from your perspective.
Sure. So, there's so many important aspects of food, and that statement, let your food be your medicine. One of the things that has been a new piece of information is food is not just vitamins and minerals and proteins and carbohydrates and fat and fiber and water, but we actually get the immune system of the plant. And some of the most potent and well-studied plant nutrients, plant chemicals, phytochemicals, are the plant's immune system. So if you put a plant in an environment where it does not have to develop a strong immune system, where you're constantly loading it up with insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, guess what? The plant does not develop an immune system. And so now what we're giving ourselves, even though the macronutrient ratio may be the same, the strength and communication and health value of the plant is nowhere near the same. Mm. And so we don't want to be intoxicating our plants for a number of reasons. Keep in mind that we're also at the top of the food chain, so we're bioconcentrators. As I tell my patients, the good news is, we don't live on dirt, air, and water. We live on lower level plants and animals that do, so we concentrate the nutrients. Now, here's the sad fact. We also concentrate the toxins. Mm. Depending upon the reference you read, it may be 1,500 times, it may be 10,000 times the concentration of the toxins. And that is what's creating a phenomenally sick group. Organic plants have to fend for themselves. So there's plenty of interesting videos showing that a strong, healthy plant, it has an automatic and amazing, almost unspoken defense against pathogens, infections, bugs. They have an incredible waxy coat on the leaf. The bugs couldn't get through it if they wanted to, so they don't even try. They go and they feed on the weak plants. And there's another statement. Parasites only attack weak tissue. Mm-hmm. So we've got all these people with all these latent infections, stealth infections, parasites, because their tissue is too weak to defend itself. And we get weak tissue from eating weak plants and weak animals.
Gosh. Great information. I love how you articulate that. And I hadn't heard the phytonutrients explain that in that way in regards to the plant immune system. So that's great information. So we know that protein, let's kind of go back to athletes and fat loss and CrossFit and all that. A lot of people are eating high protein diets. And to quote, as you said, Michael Pollan, eat food, mostly plants. So what do you tell your patients and these high level athletes that you're working with in terms of how much protein they should be getting? Can we get vegetable protein? I mean, what's your perspective there?
Well, we certainly can get vegetable protein. It generally doesn't have as high a biologic value. It doesn't have the same balance of amino acids. But what really has to happen is you have to have a balanced program where you can meet your health goals and your fitness goals. Now, people may think it's actually a protein deficiency that's keeping them from developing muscle mass, but that's probably not the case. We've already mentioned the stress hormones, which are catabolic. Now, probably the most anabolic thing we do is actually sleep, and we don't do enough of that. So prior to the advent of the electric bulb, 1870, the average population slept 10 hours a night. We're now down to 6.7 hours a night. So instead of getting 3.3 extra hours of nice, anabolic, nourishing, restful process, we've got 3.3 hours more of catabolism. As we're running those stress hormones for 3.3 extra hours, we're breaking down tissue. And the solution to that is not protein. Now, there's another factor that, or many factors that are very significant in that as well. And that is too many people have too much biologic acid in their system because of impairment in the ability to clear the acids. Now, this may be more of a tangent than you want at this point, but understand that we're made up of 100 trillion cells. They're all exposed to 1 trillion molecules of oxygen a day. And when those cells give off carbon dioxide, they create an acid in the body called carbonic acid. And this is something that we must deal with, or we will very, very simply die. So all of our elimination routes get rid of acid. We exhale carbon dioxide. Our urine should be acid. Our bowels should be acid. Our sweat should be acid. The liver and kidneys work together to process acid. And acid is catabolic. Acid impairs the efficiency of every hormone and enzyme, and especially the anabolic hormones that we're deficient in. And so we get this inflamed catabolic acid state, and we think we need more protein. We need to buffer our stress hormones. We need to sleep. We need to alkalize the system. And my world-class athletes, essentially, when I put them on an intense detox week, consistently gain muscle, and it's without any animal protein on that week. Now, I'm not against lean, clean animal protein, but it's hard to find.
That's amazing, because the school of thought in research too, if you read it, the amount of protein that you need to put your body in an anabolic state and increase mTOR and all these great growth factors is, between 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight up to 2.7 grams per kilogram of body weight. But that's going to increase the acid or perturb the acid-base balance in our body. So what I hear you saying is really focus on sleep and reduce the catabolic factors, and that will in turn enable us to not have to really crank up the protein, because that's going to make us acidic, and that's not good. Is that what we're saying?
We're saying that to some degree. Now here, let's go back to that acid component as well. So the top pharmacology texts are going to tell you that just through living, breathing, functioning, we create about 15,000 units of acid a day. The unit is a millimole, by the way. And they suggest that with foods, even on a higher protein diet, we may only increase that amount by 100 to 200 units. So it's not that these foods are contributing as much to acid burden. Amino acids, fatty acids really don't contribute much to the acid burden. But the wrong type of food does not contribute to the acid buffering systems, of which there's at least a dozen known, several of which are proteins. Albumin, a protein, is a buffer. Globulin, a protein, is a buffer. Hemoglobin, a protein, is a buffer. So phosphates are buffers. Minerals are buffers. The bicarbonate system is a buffer. So we need good elimination. We need good buffers. And we build good buffers with healthy food. So it's not so much that our food choices are adding acid. They're not building the buffers as efficient as they should. Good plants will do that. And in fact, high-dose organic plant nutrient supplements, that is the fastest route I know to alkalize the system and gives us the greatest return on our nutrition investment to change athletes fast.
That's great stuff. And you hit on detox, and I want to underscore something that I've learned from Deanna Minnick in this relationship between acid-alkaline balance and detoxification pathways. And we know that we're getting a lot of toxins from our food. Those disrupt our endocrine system and can increase, catabolic pathways and so forth. Lipogenic pathways, fat cells. I mean, you could dive into that, but let's kind of talk about, you hit on this week-long detox. And so we're going to, increase the alkalinity, get rid of some of these acid-forming foods. Kind of talk about that protocol and what people can expect.
Yeah, so there's a category of nutraceutical that's been out called functional food, medical food for now a couple of decades. And so there's several good ones on the market. And what I'll do, and by the way, they're plant-based. They usually use a very low allergenic protein that's supplemented with the right amount of amino acids to make it a complete protein. But I'll have people take, 3 or 4 servings of this every single day, 20 plus servings often of plant nutrient supplementation, and then an organic, multicolored plant-based diet. We'll also throw in some probiotics, some vitamin D, some melatonin to buffer their stress response, some omega-3s to round off their nutrient profile and control the inflammation. And we do that for a solid week. Now, there's plenty of people, day one, they go, oh, that was interesting. Day two, suddenly they start feeling not so good. Maybe day three, they feel like they've been hit by a truck. And by day 7, they're going, wow, that was phenomenal. I feel brand new. And I literally have videos. I have about 30 different Olympic athletes. Some of my Olympians won gold in London in 2012, coming back and saying that to the athlete, they've had a personal record within a week or two of completing the intense detox. And won a world championship. It felt so good on the detox, did the detox into the world championship. So it's powerful. Now, some people will have challenges with detox. We certainly know that there's variability in the ability to clear toxins. From a practical point of view, you might know someone that has a single drink, whether it's a beer or a glass of wine, they're a little tipped, and then someone else has 5, you don't know they've had one. That's certainly one pathway to clear toxins. Well, we have, hundreds of those. And so if our pathways work well, we tend to have an easy time. If not, then we often have to use buffers and accessory detox techniques. Some of the accessory detox techniques might be saunas. They might be, some people like foot baths. I haven't seen much evidence about those being effective, but there's enough people talking about them saying, you know what, I just plain feel good when I do that. So I go, all right, that's what we're after, is someone feeling good and having an easy detox. And then there's a number of nutrients that effectively buffer the detox process as well.
Great information. So let's say an athlete or a weekend warrior who just wants to be in that peak shape and burn fat and build muscle. Would you recommend a cleanse like this or a detox program maybe twice a year, 3 times a year? I mean, what do you recommend for most people?
Depends on the goal. If someone needs to get better fast, then I always tell people that, bodies respond to frequency, duration, intensity, quality, and timing of stimuli. But I'm going to answer the question slightly different, and I'm going to ask the question slightly different, because I get this asked at my seminars all the time. People say, well, doctor, how long should people detox? And so I'll jokingly set, a timer and say, well, let's do an experiment right now. Let's stop detoxing. Now, the basic element of detox is to exhale. And so you stop that, and everybody in the room is going to drop over, at a few minutes, be dead at 5. Every once in a while, we might get a pearl diver from Fiji that can make it 20 minutes, but he's done then too. So detox is a consistent part of our life. So I generally recommend detox support at least Monday through Friday, at least some type of medical functional food activity to detox on a weekly basis. And then maybe an intense weekend every month and an intense week every quarter until you're in phenomenal shape. And then maybe you get down to twice a year. But how many people out there are in phenomenal shape? And those that are go, well, why would I want to slip behind? I'll do that intense detox every single quarter. So I've done that, for at this point, 25 years. And all I can tell you is there's no way I'd give it up. There's just no way. It just feels so good to be clean, to match what I'm putting in my body as best I can, and understand the studies have been done. Our air is toxic, our water is toxic, our food is toxic, regardless of our best efforts. And we need to clear them if we want to be our best selves.
And even our furniture. I mean, you mentioned that too, water, everything. And so I like how you emphasize that we're constantly detoxing. And a lot of people that haven't been exposed to functional integrative medicine, when they hear the word detox, they think you're going to take some sort of gallbladder flush and you're going to be in the bathroom all day long. But as you heard Dr. Rakowski just say, every time you exhale, you're detoxing. Your liver and intestines are chronically detoxing. So let's talk about some of the high hit rate nutrients like glycine, NAC. When you say you're detoxing every day, you're adding in these supportive nutrients, what do those nutrients look like?
Well, I'm going to back that off and say the high hit rate is going to be the comprehensive nutrients. It's going to be the whole food, plant food, organic supplements that cover so many phytonutrients, that alkalize, that control inflammation, that have natural cyclooxygenase 2 inhibitors, anti-inflammatory control. That those may be some of the terms that some of your audience may or may not know. And then I do like the medical and functional foods because we don't eat nutrients one at a time. When you're eating a complete meal or even a healthy animal, that animal has been a bioconcentrator for all the nutrients, and you're essentially getting them to a certain degree. That plant has bioconcentrated the nutrients to a certain degree. Now, do we do onesie, twosie nutrients on occasion? Sure, we are going to do some omega-3s. Here's a scary thought, and it's something I read a few weeks ago about omega-3s being the number one supplement in America. That's not what's scary. What's scary is at number one, only 7% of people take them. So these are essential fats, essential meaning we need them or we die without them. They promote chronic illness when we're deficient, and only 7% of the population takes that. That's a crime. So, I like the broad-based, strong, comprehensive nutrients. And as we've kind of touched base, everybody that's going to consult with me is going to be told, look, you don't eat a lousy diet and take good supplements. You eat a great diet. And on top of that, you take great supplements. And then you can be your best self. And not just that, but you got to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right. Every single day.
Love it. Let's dive into move right. You've hit on that several times, and I want to kind of understand from your perspective, what's the balance between moving for health and overtraining? What sort of tips you have to share there?
So I have worked with some of the absolute best trainers in the history of the game. And I really have a great and wonderful friendship with Tim Hallmark, who trained Evander Holyfield for 20 years, Roger Clemens. And he says you train the athletes specific for the demands of their sport based on where they are. When we start talking about moving for health, I have a great trainer here in Houston, Texas. I'll give him a shout out, Jay Armstrong. And his philosophy is every joint, every range of motion, pain-free every day. I'll shout out to another great trainer that I train with, Grandmaster Al Garza, who trains me in mixed martial arts. And you learn to move your body, preferably every aspect of it, in a way that honors your movement, honors your goals, and consistently moves you forward. And it's amazing to me, and I think we as humans need a new challenge all the time. And so that's how I would like to challenge the listeners is find something that you really want to do, get the best of the best coaching that you can find, and put the best effort into it, and you will be a better you, and it will be a better world. So if you want to be a rock climber, what a great sport. If you want to be a ballroom dancer, what a great sport. If you want to be a CrossFit maniac, again, a great sport. You've got to honor your body, and you've got to recover, and you've got to have great coaches. And when you do those things, you've set yourself up for a happy existence and where you can contribute in a more positive way to our world.
What I've seen that's really fun, I want to get your perspective on, is the calisthenics. And I've seen a lot of people be able to go to a park and maybe hop on a bar, do a handstand on top of a pull-up bar and do these different things. There's a lot of videos on Instagram and throughout the web. But I think what's really important to the exercise to enforce what you're saying there is you're causing some good stress, just like we talked about earlier with, you're putting your sunglasses on your head, you don't know where they are. The body will tend to ignore that. So by pushing your body a little bit, you're causing that good stress, which is going to make you stronger, more resilient, and a better person.
There's no doubt about it. And then you look again at the sages of wisdom or the research out of Harvard, and they talk about, first of all growth occurs outside of our comfort zone. So we've got to go beyond what we already know and what we can already do in order to grow. Now, the next thing is we have three zones. We have a comfort zone, no growth. We have a learning zone, more growth. And as you get closer to the edge, more growth yet. And then we got our crash and burn zone. And we don't want to go there, but reality is you don't know how far you can go till you test those limits. So you want to sensibly test your limits. Now, let's say you're a weightlifter and you know that you can squat, let's say 300 pounds. You don't put 450 on the bar and say, let's see how that goes. You might put 302 with a good spotter and, safety bars. And that's a nice area and a nice way to grow. So you've got to understand your limits by testing them, hopefully with good guidance, and then make a sensible approach to go beyond it. As far as that outdoor training, it's beautiful. Connecting barefoot with the earth. I definitely like earthing. One of my favorite things to do, barefoot in the grass and the sand. It's a beautiful world. Why not enjoy it?
Yeah, I love that. We go hiking nearby my house, Dr. Bob, and we take our shoes off and hike. It's a short, like 15-minute hike, just a nice uphill and kind of around a creek. And it's really funny. We're talking about, causing good stress in our body. And the first time we did it, which is about a year ago, the rocks underneath our feet, it was kind of hard to like, oh man, are we going to go all the way barefoot? And now we can do the whole thing barefoot. So we're causing our pain receptors and, increasing the resiliency in our feet, which is pretty cool. So very simple, easy strategy. I think it's, something that we kind of neglect. We're so far removed from our environment in every single way, particularly, the grounding aspect. And I recommended that to a client of mine, and he was like, wait, what's the purpose? Why would I take my feet off and, put my feet on the ground? I'm like, just do it. You just got to do it. So trust me on this one. So as we finish up here, anything that we didn't talk about that maybe you want to share in terms of, we talked about stress and diet and sleep and so forth. Any other top high hit point tips you want to share that we didn't talk about?
Well, I like to talk about the Magnificent Seven, right? We got eat right, we got drink right to some degree by spillover, think right, a little bit of meditation, move right, we covered that, poop right, we talked about detoxify, sleep right to some degree, but we didn't really talk about talk right. And first of all, that's the essence of all great communication. All cells of our body communicate with one another, but understand we've got this phenomenal system between our ears that can accomplish so much. You're in the land of Bill Gates, and here's a guy that just shows what's possible. And we can all do that. In fact, it's suggested that we can all be at least as great a genius as Leonardo da Vinci, who was considered the greatest genius of all time. But we allow our brains to be filled with stuff that we would never let in there if we were aware of it. So, I have patients that are in the news business, and they'll tell you that it's not really news, it's bad news. And they have a phrase that if it bleeds, it leads. So for the last handful of years, I've been on a news fast, and I can personally tell you, I'm not aware of anything I missed in the world that I needed to know, and someone will tell me if something major happens. But if you're constantly filling your brain with advertisements that drugs are good, that violence is normal, that bad news is all around us, it's kind of hard to be a happy human. And so we want to focus on, and there's data on this from the greatest psychologists and positive psychologists in the world. We want to focus on intrinsic goals. We want to focus on being the best human that we can be. We want to focus on good, loving relationships. And that first relationship is with us. There's a gentleman who's got a great website called philosophernotes.com. I'll give him a shout out, Brian Johnson. No connection, no affiliation. But, he says, look, the three entities that I spend the most time with are God, the sages of wisdom of all time, and myself. And you're going to get some pretty good information if you connect to those sources. So in order to talk right, you need to clear your environment of these toxic messages in order to be your best you. And that's where I think that too many people just take it for granted and wonder why their world isn't what it could be.
That's amazing info. And you've said it several times, and I want to reinforce why you're such a great practitioner, Dr. Bob, is you're not just about healing yourself for you, but helping others. And you said that several times, be the best human so that you can serve in your community. And I think that's one thing I want to stress is we're all on this world to serve other people. And so that's why we need to be healthy and happy and think these good thought patterns. But to go back to the news fast, I love that. And now I haven't heard it said that way. I think it's great. But, I think people are under this assumption that because every airport you go to, there's TV, CNN everywhere. Every newsstand, there's Time Magazine, all these great magazines and so forth. But we just feel that we constantly need to be up to date on all these different things that are going on in the world. But most of which, as you said, are negative. So to hear what you're saying is you don't read any of those magazines. You just focus on personal growth, personal development, and if something major happens, you'll let someone else tell you.
That's exactly right. When I'm going through that airport, I've got these wonderful earbuds in my head playing something wonderful, uplifting, nourishing that'll help me be a better me. And Is it selfish to some degree? Sure. But last I checked, a better you makes the world better. Mm-hmm. So we want everybody to be their best self.
Love it. Fantastic. So 3 final questions here that we like to talk about and ask every guest on the show is, so you're a very successful clinician, Dr. Bob. We want to know what your morning routine is like. What time do you wake up? What do you do? Share with us a little insight into your life.
Yeah. So I'll recommend a book called Morning Miracle. And the gentleman's name is Hal Elrod. He wanted to be a motivational speaker. Just slight tangent on this. He had nothing motivating in his life. Be careful what you ask for. He was killed in a head-on collision, dead at the scene for 6 minutes. Wrote about this experience, and he's a successful motivational speaker, but he uses the acronym Lifesavers. So the S is silence. We start our day in silence. I like to call it sacred silence. You meditate, you connect with God, you have that solid, good time. The next part is actually affirmations. You look, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want to be? You speak it into existence in the positive and present tense. Next is going to be V, you visualize it. The greatest way to really connect your brain to your body, to your emotions, is to visualize in the present tense what's happening, what you want to be. The E is exercise. So I go through some exercise every single morning. R is you want to read, we get that time in, and sometimes it's audiobooks while I'm exercising so I can multitask. And then the S is scribe or write down your goals. So consistently 5:30 is my wake up time, and my best time to bed at night is 9:30, which I usually get about 6 nights out of the week. I usually see my first patient at 7. That gives me a solid hour. They like to call that the hour of power. But keep in mind, I also am going to budget learning time, exercise time throughout the course of the day, and really focus. So my hour of power starts at 5:30 a.m. and the acronym is Lifesavers.
Love it. That's fantastic. I haven't read that book. I've listened to Hal's podcast and so forth. And I know he's been interviewed quite extensively on the podcast, at Network and so forth. So I'll have to check that out. So it sounds like a great routine, and we'll recommend in the show notes at highintensityhealth.com/drbob. We'll have the show notes here and information on that book as well. So the second question here, Dr. Bob, is if there was one herb, nutrient, or botanical that you just wish everyone would take, you take quite frequently, what would that substance be and why?
Well, it would have to be the king of herbs. And that king of herbs is actually known as Ganoderma Lucidum, which is an Eastern herb. It originated in China. It was originally reserved for the royal family. There are now over 2,000 PubMed peer-reviewed studies. You Google the most alkaline food on the planet, and it comes up. It's profoundly anti-inflammatory. It increases nitric oxide. It helps to burn body fat. It lowers blood pressure. It normalizes cholesterol. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It enhances brain mitochondria. It's such a powerful anti-infective that it'll actually even block the replication of the HIV virus. Wow. And so it's one of these herbs that I believe everybody needs to take. And literally, we have a healthy coffee that we recommend to patients that has Ganoderma in it. So now we just replace something that wasn't as healthy, right? And in many cases, not healthy with what people do to their coffee, with the king of herbs, and it can be life-changing for some.
Interesting. So you said you replace it with coffee. So is it better taken in the morning if someone's going to take it, or does it matter?
You can take it day round. So we put it in, it's in the coffee that I recommend with patients, but understand it's also a GABA facilitator. And it is proven in peer-reviewed medical studies to decrease the amount of time it takes to fall asleep and the time in deep sleep. So there we get that, anti-catabolic, anabolic benefit of good, deep, nourishing sleep. So you can even take it towards the evening as well.
Love it. Fantastic. One thing that we've been doing here at our home is just the whole lavender and chamomile herb, steeping that as a tea for 5 minutes beforehand. And every morning I wake up and remember my dream, and I sit there and for 5 minutes, try to remember every little detail to kind of maybe interpret, some of the clues that the world is trying to present to me. And it's been amazing. I think, just getting that deep, restful sleep is so good for your brain and your body. So I would encourage any tools, and we'll put that in the show notes as well. I haven't heard of that herb before, Dr. Bob, but great tips. Now, the final question here is if you were to rub shoulders with Barack Obama or a congressman or a future president, and they turned to you and said, Dr. Bob, you've been doing this for 35 years. What sort of health or lifestyle tips would you want me to share with America that you feel would improve the health of America and kind of reduce our, reverse the downward spiral that we have in the healthcare system? What would you share with them and why?
I'm gonna borrow that from David Katz, who's the Center of Preventive Research at Yale, and he and I co-lectured at a conference last year. His advice was to create a nutrition for dummies where you actually have labels on food. A red label is avoid this. A yellow is, eat this in moderation. And a red is all you want. And take that one more level. And it's been proposed, but never really entertained, as far as I can tell within politics, is have a sinner's tax on bad food. It worked to deter tobacco, and that's saving numerous lives. This junk that is killing people, if we made it, $20 a serving, very few people are going to do it. And then just with that incentive alone, we'll bring it around where we can help people get healthier. So help them, make it so easy and obvious, and reward them for good choices and punish them for bad. Now, of course, we could have the debate about who's going to get the green label.
Right.
Yeah. I would put the green label on it. If it's green by nature, it's fine that way.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. But the irony of what you just said is, how the system is set up now is it's the exact opposite. These subsidized foods are actually cheaper. You can get a full hamburger with a bun and all this sort of stuff for like 99 cents. And you're thinking, how is that even possible when an apple is $1.29? You're like, wait, this came from Washington State and this burger was grown in Argentina. So I love that tip there. Fantastic. Well, Dr. Bob, it's been a pleasure talking with you. You're a wealth of information. Love what you're doing out there and changing the world. Now, how can our listeners learn more about you and your work, and maybe plug the seminar that you're doing here at the end of May?
Sure. So the very simple website for me is thedrbob.com, thedrbob.com. I have seminars going on all over all the time. At the end of May, I'm finishing a kinesiology seminar. This weekend, I'm teaching a nutrition seminar in Chicago. The following weekend in Atlanta. Summer is mostly off. I'm actually testing for my black belt this summer. And then I start up again in the fall. So it's easier maybe for people to follow me on Facebook. That's easier to change day to day and give them up-to-date health tips and seminar information. I also have a lot of education audios that I love to share, and some of those are for sale as well. So go ahead and connect with me, and I'll do anything I can to make your world better.
Love it. Keep it up, Dr. Bob. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.